and welcome to That's So Auburn, a show where we dive deep into topics and happenings across Auburn, hosted by me, Auburn Mayor Nancy Backus. Today's show, I think, is important and unique because it's a follow-up to the first topic we ever covered when the show began nearly 2 years ago. And I'm talking, of course, about homelessness and the City of Auburn's multifaceted approach, not only to housing the unhoused, but ensuring our city is a safe place to call home. In this episode, you'll hear from Anti-Homelessness Department Director Kent Hay and outreach worker Drew Conley about the work they do every day out in the streets, the parks, woods, and all corners of Auburn, and how, despite what some comments might say on social media, it's working. Our efforts are leading to permanent housing solutions in Auburn, and I'm also excited to welcome special guest Kyle Benson, who spent years homeless in Auburn. Throughout his time outside, he worked with Kent to get access to resources and housing, and recently went to jail for a few months, which he said saved his life and changed his life in a good way. So stay tuned for that discussion. Good afternoon, Kent and Drew. How are you both today?
Hey, Mayor, how you doing? It's good to be here again.
I'm doing well, Mayor. Thanks for having us.
Good. Well, it's great to have you both here. I'm glad to hear you're both doing well. And Kyle, last but not least, how are you today?
I'm wonderful, Mayor. How are you?
I am doing well, thank you. And I'm really happy and honored to have you here with us today.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here myself.
Good. So, Kyle, I want to start with you. Kent, Drew, and I know your story, or at least parts of it, and probably Kent even closer than even Drew and I. But I have a feeling our listeners don't. So tell us about yourself and the journey you've been on the past few years to get clean and sober and into housing.
Okay. Well, I met Kent when he first was here in Auburn originally, and he tried to talk me into getting housing and stuff like that. And at first I was really reluctant, and I would go back and forth between, all right, let's do this, and hiding, because I really wasn't ready to do it. But, I spent 4.5 years homeless on the streets of Auburn, and in active drug addiction, being a part of the problem, not the solution. Mm-hmm. And, it's been a journey, but I'm just glad that I finally accepted the help because it works.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. And if you don't mind, can you tell us, Kyle, how you first became homeless?
It was mainly due to my active drug use.
I see.
And I mean, I've been in drug addiction for a long time. But I was what some people call functional. Mm-hmm. And, I held a job for a while, and then I had moved to California with my kids' mother and my kids, and that's where I really, really went downhill and relapsed, and because I was on methadone before I left, and actually a part of WeCare.
Yes.
And then I came back up here, and I didn't have a job, and my drug addiction was so bad at that point that I got kicked out of my mother's house, and due to my decisions, and ended up out on the streets.
Oh, that had to be tough.
Yeah, but my mom, she only did it out of love.
Right.
At the time I didn't see that, but, it was for the better. She took my kids in and has really been instrumental in supporting me,
That's great. Not to get too personal about your children, but how old are your kids?
6 and 7.
6 and 7. Yeah. Okay. Well, Kent and Drew, you meet a lot of people like Kyle in your line of work. I'm sure folks who are struggling either mentally or with addiction or both. Kent, do you remember when you first met Kyle and how this process all started?
I do. What's funny about that is Kyle was when Kyle got here, I first started, he was at Brandon Park with his children's mom, and they were camping. And he was probably, I think he was the first person I met when we were out here. And I was trying to get him to get out of the park, and they wouldn't go. And I think he was the first person that got trespassed.
Yeah, it was me, her, Kevin, and a couple of us other.
Yeah,
But yeah, that little
and
group.
so that's where we started at. So, yeah, when I first got here, and that was kind of ground zero. And so since then, I've chased Kyle around for 4 years.
Almost 4 years.
4 years, yeah. And so, offering all the help and doing all the things. And, I tell people all the time, Kyle, there was an incident or a situation that once I went to an encampment, and I was talking to Kyle. I don't know if he remembers this, but he was sitting in front of a mirror. And I remember this vividly. And I was talking to him about inpatient treatment or going to treatment. And he was shooting up in his neck while I was talking to him.
You told me that story.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so Kyle was, really, really into his addiction. So to see where he was and to see where we're at now. And I wanted him to talk a little bit more about the jail experience and kind of how that helped him get to where he's at now, because he's in clean and sober housing. He's doing really well. He's back with his kids. I talk to his dad all the time. And so...
I've done a couple, within the last year, I've spent close to 7.5 months in jail. And, the first time I went to jail, I got out January 5th of 2023, and I had spent the better part of the end of the year in jail. And I had decided then that I was going to get clean and sober, and I asked for treatment. And the court granted me treatment, and I ended up going to Praise Hallelujah in Burien. And I got there 5 days later. I left, and I came back out on the street, and I ran into Kent and talked to him about doing everything again, and then I disappeared again, and I ended up back in jail. And I was sitting in the jail cell, and I was thinking, is this really where you want to be? Do you really want to keep doing this? And so I took every opportunity I could within the jail. It really gave me time to sit and think about a lot of things, and jail really did. If it wasn't for jail, I'd probably be dead, because my habit was so bad. Can't see me go from bad to worse, and so I'm really thankful for the correctional institutions, you know what I mean, and inpatient, because without that, I would not be here today.
And Kyle, are we talking about the SCORE?
Yeah, I have SCORE,
facility.
King County, and RJC.
Okay. So you've made the rounds.
Yeah.
And not a place that I would imagine you ever want to be again.
No, but it was definitely a good, as good as jail can be, because jail's not the funnest place to be.
No,
but,
I would imagine not.
But it is, for some of us, it is an eye-opener, and, it gives us time to sit with our thoughts and really think about what we want to do with our lives. I want to be a productive member of the society. I don't want to be part of the problem anymore, because I was one of the ones sitting in front of Safeway, Fred Meyer's. I didn't care who was there. I was using, and that's unfortunate, and I didn't think it was a problem at the time. Now I realize that I was part of the problem,
Yes.
And I mean, the encampments, Kent goes out to some of the nastiest encampments. I tried to be as good as I could be keeping up with the trash, but when everybody else is coming through, you can only keep up with so much. And I mean, I've seen, like behind Fred Meyer, when everybody was back there, it was okay for a while. I stayed back there for 1.5 years, and then I let everybody else come in, and nobody else cared for it like I did. You know what I mean? Because I wanted to have a place to be.
Sure.
I wanted to be inside, but I wasn't ready to take the steps to get off the drugs. That was my big thing, And so if I can thank the correctional system, I would, because, that it was a big instrumental part in me making the decision that I made.
I don't love to hear your story, but I love your story, Kyle. It means that you have made those difficult decisions and you have pulled yourself out of a place that I don't think anybody really wants to be.
Yeah.
And we know that jail probably isn't the answer for everyone, but that's why there is a whole continuum of resources and services. It could be that someone goes to buprenorphine, or Suboxone or Sublocade, which we would like to see them go to. Or maybe they find a way that they can do it on their own. But that's not everyone, and that's a very small number of people. And there need to be different levels of care for different individuals. And I struggle when I hear everyone say there should be no jail. There should be no jail, because sometimes that, a mom has to have tough love sometimes. You mentioned your parents, right?
Yep.
Your mom kicking you out of the house. That was tough love because she didn't want to see you die in front of her.
Right. And, me using in her house and, you know what I mean, with my kids there and, you know what I mean, just all the decisions that I made. I used to think that it's her problem, but I know now that that was my problem. I was the one making those decisions, and she just wanted what was best for me and my kids.
Right.
And tough love, love is not what you think it should be. It's what is right for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so, I'm thankful for my mom. I'm thankful for my dad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thankful for Kent, and the programs that you guys got going on here in Auburn. I didn't really appreciate them when they first started. I really didn't like Kent when it first started. I was like, oh, he's a cop.
So he told me, yes.
He's a cop. He's a cop. Don't trust him. But then I started to see what he was doing, and I was like, man, now I want to do what he does. You know what I mean? And go and help and be part of the solution.
Yes. Before I turn to Drew, can I ask you, Kyle, what would a typical day in your life when you were outside, what would that look like?
It would, I wouldn't sleep if I didn't have drugs to wake up to. You know what I mean? And then I would go store to store, stealing and making bad decisions just to get money, or standing on the freeway holding a sign. You know what I mean? Which I listen to the other podcasts, you know what I mean? And I completely agree with, people out there giving us money as a homeless person is creating a job for us, because we know that we can stand there. I used to make over $100 a day standing on the freeway. You know what I mean? Or if I couldn't make money there, I was stealing from the stores and going and selling it to my drug dealer.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so and then I would spend all day, every day, consumed by I need to get drugs, or smoking drugs anywhere and everywhere I could, or injecting, because I went from heroin and meth to fentanyl and meth, or blues and meth. And, it was a very hard life. There at the end, I was doing so many drugs that the only thing I could do was focus on getting drugs or smoking drugs. I was smoking drugs every 10 to 15 minutes.
Oh, my word.
You know what I mean? I was doing over 100 pills a day, a gram of fentanyl, you know what I mean? And that's just on a day where I didn't have money. I had to have that to be well.
Oh, Kyle.
And then when I started, you know what I mean? And then not to mention the distribution of drugs to keep my habit going. You know what I mean? I don't want to incriminate myself, but,
Sure.
that it's just the truth.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I did anything and everything I could to get drugs.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I'm not happy that I did that, but that's what it is. And if I can share my experience, strength, and hope with people, now I chair AA meetings. You know what I mean? I go to We Care. I'm lowering my dose of Suboxone. I'm in housing. I wake up thankful every morning that I went to treatment and that I'm in housing.
Oh, Kyle, I just love to hear that. It sends tingles, right? Just to hear you say from where you were and what you were willing to do to where you are now and what you're willing to do.
Yeah.
That's an amazing turnaround.
Yeah. If you can move mountains to get drugs, you imagine what you can do sober, you know what I mean? And the mountains you can move, just putting the amount of energy into being a productive member of society.
Listen to you. What a powerful message that is. Wow.
Yeah.
If you moved mountains to get drugs, you can move mountains being sober and the amazing work that you can do.
Yeah.
That is a message right there.
Yeah.
Drew, I'd like to pivot to you for a little bit. And you've worked for the city for about 8 months now. Tell us a bit about your story and what led you to us.
So I'm from the Puget Sound region originally, grew up out here, and went to school up in Seattle, and when I was there, I really decided that, I wanted to pursue a career in public service and government work. So my senior year of college, started the application process and was fortunate enough to get selected for a federal government agency. So less than a month after graduating, this was June 2015, I graduated in July, started working in D.C. and worked hard for 7 years, and I'm grateful for the experiences. And my job took me across the country. I traveled a lot. Got to work with a lot of incredible men and women, and in public service and doing the things that we did. And after 7 years, I had to ask myself some tough questions, and ultimately decided that I did want to continue to serve the public and work in government, but it was time for a transition. So August of 2022, wrapped things up in D.C. and came back to the West Coast. And before coming back here to Washington, spent some time down in Los Angeles doing some full-time volunteer work with a nonprofit down there, doing outreach for homeless people, and then also doing outreach in low-income housing projects. And I loved that experience. I loved the program down there. And then right at the beginning of 2023, end of 2022, beginning of 2023, came back to Washington and started with the city in June of last year, so June 2023. And it's been a quick 8 months. I've definitely learned a lot. And I'm grateful to be a part of the team here with the city of Auburn.
Well, we're excited and grateful to have you with us. I remember sitting in on your interview, and I was just mesmerized by the story that you had to tell and your deep commitment to this work. And I just want to go on the record for saying thank you, and I am glad you are here along with Kent, and we have Patty, who is the newest member of the team, and the work that the three of you do on a daily basis. I listen to your stories. I've been out in the encampments, and I am so thankful that you are willing to do the work that you do. It's certainly not for everyone. It can hurt your soul, right? When you see someone who is willing to do 100 fentanyl pills a day just to survive, I guess.
Just to function.
Just to function. Yeah. And then seeing what the outcome of your work can be. Someone like Kyle, who has seen that is not the life that they want for themselves and is willing to do the work. That has to be really soul building for you.
Yeah, there's so much to this job that I don't know if I fully understood it when I first started. Certainly we have our mission and we have our responsibilities, and we go into the encampments and we connect people with employment or treatment or housing. But there is that side of it, that emotional side, where you see people who are struggling with substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder. And one thing that Kent has really taught me, and I've learned a lot about this, is that, we're not here to save people. We're here to help people. And we're not here to rescue people from the consequences of their decisions, right? They, good or bad, they will walk through the consequences of their decisions, and we'll walk alongside them. But we're not here to save people. We want to do the things to help. And so with that in mind, I think it's really helped me from that emotional side, where it's I don't have to go home from the job and take the emotional weight of the job with me. When I'm home, I can leave work at work, and I can have a fulfilling life at home. And when it's time to work, we do the things, we work very, very hard. But then when it's time to go home, it's time to go home.
I'm glad to hear you say that you can put this work aside, because you need that. You absolutely need to put that aside. And I know Kent and I have had those conversations many, many times. So let's talk a little bit about the housing approach, housing policies. What housing policies, and Kent, you can jump in here too. Tell us what you see working in Auburn and the surrounding area, because I think there's been a recent shift from clean and sober housing to harm reduction housing. And I'd love to get both of your inputs on that. I have my thoughts, but I would love to hear from the two of you.
Yeah, so I think when a lot of people are, let's say they're driving in their car, they're going to the store, and they see a homeless person, it's probably likely that they think to themselves, like, oh, I wish that person could get into housing, right? And housing is kind of like this word that a lot of people throw out. But what I think a lot of people don't understand is that there are a lot of different types of housing, right? So kind of the first one would be emergency housing. So that's something like the Ray of Hope shelter here in Auburn. And, shout out to Debbie Christian. She's an incredible partner in our team's mission. So there's emergency housing, which is like a shelter. And then after that, you can have something like transitional housing, and clean and sober housing is generally a type of transitional housing. And basically it's where the person has a place to stay, and oftentimes there's like a time limit. There's one permanent housing provider that I've connected a few clients with, and they're there now, and it's a 24-month program, right? So the idea is they move into transitional housing, they have a stable place to live and eat and do all the things, but the goal is for them to get to something more permanent, which would be the next step. So permanent housing, and that's their own unit and their own apartment, and they pay rent, and they have all the lease landlord tenant laws apply. And after that, kind of the top level, if you will, is what's called permanent supportive housing. So that's typically a studio apartment in one bedroom. Some of them have in-unit shower and bathroom, but within that permanent supportive housing, you also get things like case management. Some of these housing providers have medical teams that come in and work with the clients. Oftentimes the clients get multiple meals a day, and so there's more support. And so I think it's important for people to understand that when the word housing is thrown out, it's like, okay, well, there's differences to these things, right? So with all that to say, and with all these different kinds of housing, like in Auburn, and this is something I've learned a lot from Kent as well, is we move from step to step, structure to structure. So when, the question is what's working with housing, what works is when we move from step to step. And what I mean by that is, okay, so someone's living outside. We offer them shelter. So they move into shelter. They move into that first level, that emergency shelter. And then, so we've gotten them off the street, right? And now that they're in the shelter, we work with them to get them into something more permanent, right? So we might not be able to get someone who's living outside into that permanent supportive housing right away. Typically, depending on paperwork and government regulations, it can take 6 to 8 weeks, but we can move in the right direction. We can take a step forward. And so that's, I think, what really works is that idea of, hey, we're going to move in the right direction. The biggest thing being accountability for the person getting housed. We need people to participate. So that's the key, is moving from step to step with accountability from the person. And I will give a client 99%, but like I need them to give me 1%. It's not a 50-50 split. And Kent says this a lot. It's not a 50-50 split. If you give me 1%, like I will do so much. Like I will do all the things, all the paperwork, the disability verifications, income verifications, asset verifications, homelessness verification. Like we take clients to Seattle to do application appointments. Like we will do everything that we can, but we need people to show up and participate. So that's what really works. And then that to kind of wrap up the answer. I know this is a long answer, but in my opinion and in my professional experience, being here for 8 months, like the housing that I've seen that works the best is where drug and alcohol use is not allowed. And this is, I think Kent can speak more to this, but now there's harm reduction housing where there are essentially like no restrictions on any type of use within the unit. And there's very little accountability, and that's what's not working. So the housing that works is when accountability is prioritized across the board and people are committed to living a clean and sober lifestyle.
Kent?
Yeah. So the funny part is back in the day, and I think people remember, is there was a push for safe injection sites. And so for me, and I know we don't see eye to eye on
We
this, Mayor,
don't. I don't
but
like them at all.
I was okay with the safe injection sites, and I think the way it was put, I think people had this whole, they were thinking about paying for drugs and people and, giving people drugs and all that stuff with taxpayer money. But the way I saw it was, if there's a location for people to be and have a place where they can use that's away from, everybody else, so people can enjoy the parks and all the things, and the needles wouldn't be in the playgrounds and all those things, but there's a place where people could be, and there was, someone administering this where people wouldn't overdose, and, all those things. So it was a place where people can be, and then everybody else in the community can kind of enjoy the rest of the city while other people are getting help. And so I don't think they sold it the right way to people, and the way they made it sound, it was just off-putting. But what happened was there was a slow transition into what we call now harm reduction housing. So it's the same thing, it's just they didn't ask you or tell you about it. So harm reduction housing is pretty much safe injection sites, right? It's just there's no needles. People are just using fentanyl and things like that. So now you can use all you want inside, but not just one location, but most of your transitional housing and sheltering housing has become harm reduction housing. So for those people who are trying to get into housing who are clean and sober and just trying to live and make it, now you're in a place where everybody is able to use, and so now it's really difficult for you to keep your sobriety. And so it silently moved from safe injection sites to harm reduction housing. Mm-hmm. And so we just don't talk about it. So that's the hard part is putting people into housing and some people not wanting to go because of that, or putting people into housing and they're like, oh, I can use, and now it's just they're using while they're inside and bringing people back with them, and then it just turns into chaos.
I can see the problem with that. I mean, if I had that option when I was homeless as a first step, or even a second step after the Ray of Hope, mm-hmm. I would have taken it, but I could see it doing more damage in my life than more good.
Right.
And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. For someone getting into this harm reduction housing, it might be the best step for them. But Kyle, for you, as you were saying, it wouldn't have been a healthy step for you. You might not be here with us today.
Right. I could definitely see myself because, I mean, I don't know how it's structured because I'm just hearing about it. But if it was regulated, maybe it might have been, I would have taken it to be inside.
Sure.
But, I could definitely see myself, because I've overdosed 8 times.
Oh.
You know what I mean? One time I woke up in the Auburn hospital with a tube in my throat. So, I could see myself overdosing in a place like that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But, if it's more regulated than what I'm thinking it is, it might be a good thing for some people,
Right.
And for who's ever listening and they're not really sure what that term is, harm reduction, I can maybe offer some clarity on that. So harm reduction is basically an approach to care that presupposes that drug use is inevitable. And so practically what that looks like, you typically see it 2 ways. First is an outreach. So a harm reduction approach to outreach will see outreach workers distributing what they would call safe use products within the community. So what that means is that they give homeless members of the community needles and pipes, right? And then the other side of harm reduction is in the housing, which is kind of more what we're talking about. So the practical way you see harm reduction in housing is that people are allowed to use with no restrictions in their rooms. Or if someone is struggling with alcohol use disorder, they can drink with no restrictions in the building. And so if people are thinking, in King County, smoking cigarettes was banned from, you couldn't smoke cigarettes inside. That changed, right. Back when I was a kid. I remember that. But I'm not quite sure how these housing providers have gotten around that, but they do allow clients to smoke indoors, whether it's meth or fentanyl or cigarettes. So the problem, and Kyle, you kind of touched on this, is that there are overdoses that happen in these rooms because these rooms, it's if it's permanent supportive housing, that client can live there for the rest of their life if they choose. Like, they're the only one that has the key. They sign the lease, right? So it's their unit. So they're behind a closed door. And if they're using, the person could have overdosed and died however long ago, and no one would know. So that's kind of in summary what harm reduction is, both on the outreach side and on the residential housing side.
Thank you, Drew. That was an excellent explanation of that. I have my own opinions, and they have morphed over time. And there is a campaign, ads on television right now that are talking about harm reduction. And the first time I heard it, basically telling you, don't use without a friend. I screamed at the TV. It's like, how about saying don't use?
Yeah, don't use to begin with, right?
How about saying we have places for you to go, we have help for you, instead of don't use unless you're with a friend.
Like a We Care commercial.
Yeah.
I advocate for them 100%.
We Care does amazing work, and we are so thankful that they're in our community. I'm amazed at the work that they do. But it just, I understand, I try and understand all sides of an issue, and I understand that if we can keep a person alive, that maybe the next time, right, Kyle, if there had only been 7 times and 8, if you hadn't recovered at number 8, we wouldn't, again, be with you here today. So I can appreciate that Narcan, naloxone, and this don't use without a friend being present are ways of keeping a person alive for one more time. But we have got to start talking more about, let's not have any more times. Let's get you off of this ugly, ugly stuff that you're addicted to.
Yeah, it's one of the worst things that we've seen. Everybody thought the crack epidemic was bad, and then the Oxycontin was bad, and now it's fentanyl. In my time out there, thankfully I was trained in CPR, you know what I mean? And there was a lot of people that overdosed, 13 people overdosed. And there was 14 of them, but I couldn't save that one, and that's one that's always bothered me.
Sure.
And we did always tell each other, don't use unless you're with a friend. Don't use by yourself. You know what I mean? And it's not because, I want your drugs. It's because we come together as a community out there. We network, you know what I mean? We do everything together on a daily basis, you know what I mean? We all have our little groups, and then we come together as a whole, and we care for each other. Even though a lot of us were stealing from each other, we still cared for each other in the sense that we didn't want you to die. You know what I mean? And so, I can see harm reduction. Harm reduction kept me from getting hepatitis C, the needle exchanges and whatnot like that.
Right.
And Kent coming out with the nurses, and, that really helped me a lot. So I do agree with harm reduction on some sense, but for me personally, I think harm reduction housing would have been a bad thing for me, because then I would have been using alone.
Right.
You know what I mean? And like Drew said, there are overdoses that happen. So, because fentanyl is such a danger, you don't know what you're getting time to time. It changes every time. It doesn't have a consistent potency.
No, and I've said there will not be any old fentanyl addicts.
Right.
Right. That's just, they're not going to.
Or few.
Very few.
Maybe 0.5% or something is my guess.
Right.
It's
just, it scares me to think of what people in our community are using, and even young people who think that they want to try drugs. First of all, I would encourage you not to, but saying, my buddy's giving me this pill, it's an oxy, or I'm just going to feel better for a while, or I injured myself in athletics and I need something, and the doctor won't write a prescription anymore, and you don't know what's in there, and all it takes is one time. We've heard too many cases of fatal overdoses of someone that wasn't an addict.
especially nowadays.
Yes.
Fentanyl's in everything.
Yeah.
It is.
And Mayor, real quick, I just want people to think about and just picture this. COVID, we were losing people. Government shut down. They told people that if you didn't get this shot, so whether you agree with the shot or not, that's irrelevant. What I'm saying is that there was a place where it was a public health crisis, and people were losing their jobs if they did not take a shot, because the goal was to save people's lives with this medication that they came out with, right? And so switch over to fentanyl, and fentanyl is killing more people than COVID killed people. And there's a medication, there's medications to help that we don't talk about. And one is Sublocade. And I know a few people who are on Sublocade, and swear by it, that it takes away your wanting to use, in the thought process and all the things, right? You don't go through withdrawals and everything. And so we're in a public health crisis again. And in COVID, we were willing to do, we declared a state of emergency, and we're willing to do emergent things, but then we have this fentanyl crisis, and we have a medication that's helping, but we're not willing to do, things to prevent death. So there's a medication to help prevent death, but we'd rather sprinkle Narcan around. And so I have a hard time, and I have to ask the question, why is it okay for, during COVID and people who are working to get their money taken and things like that, but we have folks out here who are dying right and left, and we have a medication to help, but we're not willing to do what's necessary. And I have to ask the question, is it because they're homeless? Why are we not willing to do the things to save lives for these folks who are using fentanyl?
Couldn't agree with you more, Kent. We've had numerous discussions on this, and we are in agreement. And there are no throwaway lives out there. There is no one's life that is more valuable than another. We're all created equally, correct? So then we should be willing to do what it takes to save another individual. And I'm thankful for Kent and Drew and Patty, who's not with us here today, but for the work that you do to save people. And before we go, Kent, I did want to chat a little bit about an op-ed that you did for the Seattle Times recently called 4 Ways to Change Our Approach to the Housing Crisis. And you often, the unmentioned fact that a lot of our housing isn't necessarily a lack of emergency housing, but emergency housing that fits someone's desires. Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so, I've been doing this for a while, and now, almost 4 years here in Auburn. And so I know, like, if everybody decided that they want to go inside at one time, I could understand we don't have enough housing. But there are people who, are not going to go inside. And then there are people who, so there's a daily list that comes out of housing that we can nominate people for throughout King County. Most of it is in Seattle and in those areas. But they're available units, right? So they might be a studio, they might be a shared room, all the things, right? They might not have a bathroom in there, you have to share a bathroom. But, when you're offering these to people who are experiencing homeless out here, who are literally living in the bushes and filth and things like that, and you're like, I have a place for you to go, and people are like, how many rooms does it have, or how big is it? And they start asking questions because they want what they want rather than what's available. So then, the question always becomes, what are we doing, right? Are we housing people? Because that's the message that keeps being sent out is, if there was housing, people would go. But yet we're out here offering housing, and people are like, I don't want to go there, or I don't want it this way, or I want it over there. And so then it becomes trying to tailor housing to not what's available, but what people want.
I was one of them people, remember?
I do.
He had me housing in Seattle, and I was like, I'm not going to Seattle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I didn't care about shared room, or whatever, but yeah. I can definitely agree with that people want what they want, you know what I mean? And honestly, that wasn't fair to me, and I apologize for that.
No.
You know what I mean? Because, that was out of line on my part. You know what I mean? I should have accepted the housing because I did want to be inside, but I didn't know nobody in Seattle, and I didn't. You know what I mean? I'm scared of Seattle because I know what happens down there, and the homelessness down there it's bad, and I was scared that I would get wrapped right up in it.
Yeah, see, and those are the conversations we have to have with folks is like, we're not sending you from Auburn homelessness to Seattle homelessness, right? We're literally like, this is an apartment this is a place where you have a key, right? And you can be inside. You don't have to be downtown. You don't have to be involved with folks. And so familiarity, right? Being in a place. I know people, and I hear you because I'm out there with you. You know, I see all the people. We've watched a lot of people die, and yeah, it's sad. And we know a lot of people who've passed away.
Yeah.
But the thing about that is, I know it's a community, and that's what they call it out here for the most part. The sad part is, again, watching from the outside looking in, is I hear all the, it's like prison out here, except there's no walls. So it's, the rapes, the assaults, the stabbings, the stealing from each other, and all the things that go into shootings, right?
And they
all
don't
those
get
things.
reported to the police.
And they don't get
back
reported
in the
because this is
encampments.
prison. It's the
Sure.
same prison mentality. It's the same prison rules. There's just no guards, right? I mean,
Right.
there's guards, but they're not guards. They're
Right.
the guards that decided that they were going to bring some kind of justice. But I know we keep calling it a community, but it is a dysfunctional community.
Yeah.
But it is familiar. And I tell people all the time, a lot of these folks are not just friends. It's like prison where you're just in there for so long.
There's a convenience.
Right. And so, because half of the time people, again, you're not out there running around with the same people you were with before.
Right.
You might see them, but, you got a different journey now. Right. And so
Yeah.
I tell people, when you're stuck somewhere like prison, you're not going to take those people with you when you leave prison. Right. It's just the fact that you're stuck in there with the folks, and it just becomes familiar, and it's hard to leave familiarity. Right. Mm-hmm. So, but at the same time, we keep talking about if there was enough housing, people would just go, and I don't believe that. I think we've created this this practice of telling people that just stay homeless and we'll figure it out for you, and we'll give you what you want. So don't take what's available. And so it's I think we are the problem. I don't think it's a homelessness issue. I think it's a we issue. We've created a lot of these problems by justifying why people are not going inside, mm-hmm. and making excuses for folks not wanting to take the housing. Yeah. Because everything is a stepping stone, right?
Right. Since joining the city 8 months ago, I've had more people tell me no than yes. So I've nominated them, I've secured them housing, everything's good to go. All we have to do is the paperwork. And I tell everyone I work with, I will work with you to get the paperwork. Like, whatever it takes, we'll get the paperwork in, we'll get it on time. It's ready for you. It's yours. It's got your name on it. We just got to get through the paperwork. And I've had more people say, nope, I don't want it, for whatever reason, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. Than tell me yes. And for the people who tell me yes, like, they're in housing now. And for the people who have told me no, then, they're still in their situation. And that is something that has been particularly challenging, is that I've gotten more no's than yes. Just because, we want to get people housed, but as badly as I want to get someone into housing, if I want it more than they do, it won't work. Right. They have to want it, yeah, because their success belongs to them. Like, I don't take credit for getting people in housing. That's their success, right? That's your success, Kyle. Right. In the same vein, like, if someone fails, like, that, it's not my responsibility, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's on them too. But it's awesome to see when people do succeed, because, like, that is your work. That's your effort. I'm here to walk alongside you, but that's on you. Like, congratulations, like, all the things. And so,
but with that, without you guys too, you guys doing the 99%, you guys do a big chunk of what we should be doing for ourselves. And so I appreciate everything that we got going on here in Auburn.
Thank you, Kyle. So how many people do you think, between Drew and Kent, how many people have you walked along beside on their journey to get into housing? How many people have been successfully housed?
Are we just talking about the whole time that I've been here, or
maybe how about last year? So
last year we did around 96, so close to 100 people, yeah, that we housed.
Six of those were the folks that I helped. So Kent did most of the work on that one. I'm still learning, but
we use all the things, and I think that's what people understand. There's nothing that we don't use. We're partnering with HMIS. We're partnering with the SHS. We have a clean and sober housing program that we started here in the city of Auburn. Yes. We use our opiate settlement funds for clean and sober housing as well to get people inside. Yeah. We house people at apartments. We make connections. I mean, so we do the work, and so we don't spend our time talking about what should happen. We do what's necessary. And so with the help of Debbie and the Salvation Army and those folks to help with moving costs and just the things that help us move people forward. But there's a lot of people that will take the help. We chased them for a long time.
Yes.
So, so I want people to understand that it wasn't just like, hey, you want some housing? And people are like, yeah, this is 3 years in the making. This is a long time chasing people and moving people. And as far as the camping ordinance, I would tell people the camping ordinance is what makes people uncomfortable enough to have those conversations, because I tell people if I go out there and I'm talking to you and you don't feel like anything is wrong, then there's no conversation that we can have. So when you're uncomfortable, there's a conversation that we have to have. And so it opens the door for communication. Even if it's someone that's angry, it still opens the door for communication to start having that conversation of why you're angry and how do we get past that and how do we figure this out. So where there's no motivation, you have to create motivation.
Well, there you go. I think that's a great quote to end on. So, Kyle, thank you for making the journey to City Hall to come talk with us today. It's an honor to meet you. And Kent and Drew, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. I very seldom see you in the office unless it's just passing through to get more things or maybe to have lunch. You are out there in the encampments doing the work every single day of the week. And I am so thankful for both of you. And I think this discussion, I know it's been valuable for me. I hope for those who are listening, it's been valuable for them and to help understand the work that we're doing every minute of every day. Thank you, all three of you, for joining me today. And thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Mayor.